So, welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. Today, we are going to be talking with the Chief Operating Officer of Kesler Science, none other than Allie Stone herself. And we're going to start by asking Allie, why is science so important to us today?
Hi, Diane. Um, okay, let's split this up. I'm a thinker, right? So I've been thinking about this. And to me, there's science and there's science literacy, right? Now, science, here's a thought process for you. What if we stopped all science today? How would that affect most of our lives if we just stopped researching, we just stopped developing, stopped exploring? I think some people would go, no big deal. Like that, we're fine where we are. Let's avoid the robot apocalypse. Let's, not turn into Skynet. But then we have folks like I have a friend whose daughter has something called a desmoid tumor. It's very new. They barely know what to do with it. It's not cancer. It's not going to spread through your body. But if you try to cut it out, it's going to grow back 4 times faster. They have no idea how to treat these things. They're just starting. They need science. They need someone to get in there and pursue that. You think about the number of people that are driving, the number of people we have to feed, the water that we have to keep clean. There are so many things that science has yet to do. So science is still super important in our lives, and we have so much yet to explore and solve. And then there's science literacy, which is where my job comes in. And to me, if you're not literate about science, then you don't get to understand the real way that the world works. And that means you're stuck in rumor and superstition. You're in the dark ages of understanding how everything works. And that is just not fair. You need to know. Students need to know. They need to have the underpinning of this is what makes the sun warm up each day, and this is what makes our lives have vitamin D in it, and this is why we breathe the way we do, and why the sky is blue. They need to know that stuff. Otherwise, they're just guessing, and that's no way to live a life. So that's why I think science and science literacy are super important.
Allie, you raised some really great points about both. If we stop doing science today, our lives wouldn't be the same. And there are so many things, just like with your friends, there are advances in technology that we need to make. There's advances for climate change. We've got the solutions, but we have to keep doing science to be able to find them. And I love science because we get to admit we're wrong. We get to rethink things. We get to learn new things. And we learn from the things we've already done. And the part about science literacy, I want to kind of really zero in on as we move forward, because I know as I've been traveling the country and working with teachers, and I know you know this through Kesler, that there are teachers who are afraid of teaching science, that they feel ill equipped to teach science. Maybe they didn't get a good science background. And so, how do we make science less scary for teachers and at the same time more relevant for their students?
Yeah. So teaching science is a strange bag because on the one hand, you're given all these standards that you have to meet, and they're fairly intimidating looking standards. And then you have these science and engineering practices that you have to meet and tools you have to incorporate into your classroom. And then you want to have fun and you want students to actually grow up to love science and enjoy it the way that we do. People who are
Right.
in science, we had science teachers that helped us see the fun and the excitement and the wonder in science. So it can feel like you're being pulled in lots of different directions. So when I talk to teachers, this is the way I frame it for them. You go to the standards and you find the most essential part of that standard. What is the core? What do they really want you to communicate? By and large, you can almost kind of ignore the science and engineering practices a little bit, because if you're doing fun science, I can almost guarantee you are also doing science and engineering practices. It's very hard to have fun doing science and not use tools and not be making models and not be drawing conclusions. Robust science tends to just fill those things in. So
Right.
I make plans around things that are stimulating and fun. And then I go figure out, oh, guess what? That I just hit 7 of those science and engineering practices. It's usually not a problem. And GSS, they kind of even bundle it together for you. So it's so much easier. But if you really just dig in and say, what do they just want the student to come away with? What does the student need to really feel then you can go in and you can say, what's going to make this fun? And the stuff that makes it fun and relevant for students, one, choice. If they get to choose what they're doing, there is nothing more addictive to a student than autonomy. They don't get that much of it in their lives, and being able to control, choose their own adventure, super powerful for them. And they tend to choose things in a way that does make it relevant to them. You know, if you let them write a song about science, they're going to write it and reflect their own experience. So choice, super powerful. And then hands-on, get them messy, get them
Yes.
into doing science. Science facts are fascinating. You know, we love those books with all the pictures and all that stuff. It's fascinating. But when you actually get to handle the science, that's where you start to see yourself in a whole different way, interacting with real world activities. So that's what I recommend to teachers is just boil it down, make it engaging, give them choices, get their hands on it. That's the fun right there.
And that hits students across the board, no matter what their interests are or whether they're pursuing a STEM career or not. You're giving them opportunities to engage with science, to connect it to their own lives, like the artist or the musician, but also to realize, and I think this gets back to science literacy, by understanding it and by knowing where to go for information, you're giving them a chance to grow up in a world where they're better able to go, okay, this makes sense to me. Let's go check the sources on that. And so you're raising a generation of science literate human beings as well.
Yes. When they can understand that good science publishes and peer reviews and then retracts as needed, you know,
Right.
and that it's not a done it's not a done deal. It's not a closed conversation. It's just a constant developing thing. And when they realize that, then they just start to see everything as possibilities, as potential, and they're more curious about where this information comes from. What are the motivations for the people doing the study? You know, when they can connect all the dots and realize some people are out there putting science out in the world because they have very different motivations than what you would expect, you know, and you can get them really hooked on that too, on kind of the politics and the, you know, the stuff behind the scenes. It's pretty interesting for the higher level kids. The younger kids,
Right.
not so much, but the high schoolers for sure. They love that. Spill
And
the tea, as they say.
exactly. And you were in the classroom before you came to Kessler. So you're coming at this from a science teacher perspective and somebody who's got real world experience. So, what were some of the strategies you used as a teacher to make science and STEAM more engaging and meaningful for your kids?
Yeah, so we definitely did hands-on. I didn't have a huge budget. It was basically my own money, you know, and I did not
Yep.
have a ton of money either.
Story of most teachers.
Exactly, right? So one thing I did is I did have a table in the back that was my maker space, and this was not a fancy maker space. This was basically me raiding recycling bins all over the school to get cardboard tubes, cardboard boxes. I'd bring in spare yarn when I'd finish a crocheting project. We had some Legos that people donated, you know, just whatever.
Right.
Um, we would try to put in there, and I did get a grant to get some of the snap circuits and things in there. So it's just whatever I could get. I mean, little tiny grants. Um, so whatever I could do back then to just let them explore, that was fun. Uh, when we were learning about mussels, I had seashells, so I would bring in seashells and we would sort seashells, and everyone just got to handle these little seashells. And of course, we made slime, and we would dissect lilies, and we'd look at things under. I managed to get a little microscope, the magnifying thing that would attach
Right.
to my screen, and you know, then everybody just wanted to have a turn looking at stuff under that. So just anything we could do to get hands on the science or get creative with the science. I remember we had to learn about spiders. So we learned about all these different kinds of spiders, and then I put it out to the students, design your own spider. You know, take all these different parts and adapt a spider into something remarkable. And but you have to justify it. Why is this going to be better than any original spider that's out there? How's it going to fill its little niche in the ecosystem
Ooh, I
better?
like that.
And it was fun because the artists got super creative, the writers got super creative, you know, just trying to find that fun and those different ways of approaching things. And I'm glad that you mentioned that I was a science teacher. I feel like an accidental CEO or COO. I didn't aim for this, this is where I ended up. I aimed for, I just love science and want to do science with as many people as possible. So my heart is definitely on the let's make this fun side of science, not the let's, run a company side of it.
Well, let's get to the how did you get from teaching to running a company? Tell us about your adventures in learning. How did you get from there to there?
Well, it's interesting to me because I have children and my youngest two are daughters, and watching them interact with science now. And I think about the way I interacted with science when I was in school. I don't know, you're my generation, so we did a lot of, career testing really early. Everyone was
Yes.
funneled into whatever and channels they were going to go into. And I remember taking those tests, and I came out with a very strong teaching leaning, which made sense. I was that kid that if I was going to give a research report in, middle school and you were after me, you rejoiced because it was guaranteed you were going to have an extra day because I was just so excited to share all the cool things I learned that I was going to go wildly over the time limit and you were going to definitely have spare time. So I knew that teaching was it. And I got into high school and I loved English. I loved stories. I loved writing. I loved grammar, which is disgusting, but I did. I also loved science. I took all these science classes and I just loved it. But when it came time to choose what I was doing, I look back and I realize every science teacher I had was male, every single one of them.
Yep.
I had female English teachers and male science teachers. And I think that just influenced my learning. I also knew no actual scientist whatsoever. No one was doing science around me to even consider, well, you could go do something in science. Never even
Right.
crossed my mind. So went off to college, decided to become an English teacher. I studied, secondary English education, but I was also an absolute geek. So I would hang out with people in the computer labs because we didn't even have,
Yeah. I
everything in
remember those
a
computer
room,
labs.
right? So yeah, the I had I had been part of the middle school founding computer science club when I was in middle school. So I was in that computer lab. I was in my element. I was teaching myself HTML. I had to write it on Notepad and upload it to see how it turned out and Mozilla. And it was so much fun. And I got through everything but my student teaching, and I went and did my student teaching. And I ran smack into the bureaucracy side of teaching. I was doing everything that I wanted to do for lessons. And then as an English teacher, I had to, like every 2 weeks, assign a 2 to 3 page essay from these Maryland state requirements that I then had to grade and give feedback on, in addition to whatever else I was doing. And just the grind of that and witnessing the behind the scenes of what it was like for these teachers who just wanted to do good things. And I got really, really disillusioned with what I was going to be able to accomplish right off the bat, especially in a very big district like that. I was at the University of Maryland in College Park. So we're in Prince George's County,
Right.
this big school area. So I actually went into technical writing when I got out of college. I spent years writing in the security industry and training people in the security industry and how to design and install their systems. And then I moved to Maine and discovered, oh, little tiny schools, guess what? It's a whole different world up here. People actually can connect with their students. They don't have 180 students every day. And I was just so excited to discover this was my joy again. This was a delight to teach. And so I got back into that and ended up teaching at the elementary level. So I was teaching sixth grade, which was still elementary where I was. So I was teaching all the subjects and it was wonderful. I just loved it because I got to do my science, I got to do my
Yep.
English. It was
I
fantastic.
loved linking all of that. I get you.
Yes, exactly. And uh and then Chris Kessler, I was using some of his stuff in my science classes, and he had a Facebook group, 15,000 people strong at the time. And he tossed out little notes saying that he was looking for someone to help him edit inquiry labs. And I thought, there's no way. that I will ever get through the process with 15,000 people. I'm sure 10,000 of them are going to drop a note in this Google form that he put out there. So I sent my response off and I got an email back. And he's like, "Hey, how'd you like to talk about this?" And I panicked because I'm a meticulous person. I had not been meticulous about that application because I thought it was such a snowball's chance. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be so ready for this interview." So I'm making lists and I'm planning it. And so I write back, I'd love to do that. And in typical Chris fashion, as you've met him, he writes back, "Great, are you busy today?" I was like, "I'm on spring break. Sure, I'm available." He's like, "Great, 15 minutes." Diane, I was standing in my pajamas in my bedroom on spring break. I was not prepared for an interview. So I said, "Sure, call me." So he calls me and I'm ready. I've got all the things I forgot to put in the application the first time, which was literally 3 questions long, also in Chris fashion.
Hmm.
He calls and he tells me all about the project and I'm ready. I'm waiting. And he says, "Great. When can you start?" Okay, today, I guess. And so I started editing for him. And as I was working for him, it was like, "Oh, you don't have anyone to help you organize the company." He was a one-man operation at that point, all those years ago. And so I would just make suggestions about how we could organize things. And he'd be like, "Great, do that." And then after a while, he was like, "Stop asking, just go do it. Just make it all better." And then I ended up coming out of the classroom and we just took off. It was just so much fun. He's in Texas, I'm in Maine. We get together once every couple of years and that's how it's happened. So yeah, that's
So
that's how I ended up where I am.
I'm fascinated by that. And I know, having seen Kessler Science, that it's grown from a one person, two-person operation
Oh, for
to a
sure.
much bigger thing. So, talk about what you do at Kessler. And as you're doing that, also talk about what it's like to manage a team of people scattered all over the country who may never meet each other except through Zoom.
Right. Yes, we are a 100% remote company and I love it. All of these folks who are saying that everyone has to go back to the office, they're not doing a single bit of that based on science. All of the research says people are so productive when they work from home, more productive than in the office. The reasons that people want folks back in the office have to do with things like trust, motivation, real estate. There's just so many other factors that go into it. So I feel like the cat who ate the canary, like, wow, we've got this locked down. We know how to be productive. We know how to work from home. It is so much fun. I am the chief worrier and chief planner. Those are my unofficial titles. I just figure out where things are going to break and try to avoid it. That's really my job. I try to find the right people to fix problems. So, as I've brought you in before to help with different things we run into and your expertise. So that's my job. But having teachers work for us, we hire science teachers. It's just impossible to do a science education company if you don't just hire science teachers. So we hire science teachers to work for us, and having them all over the country means I get tapped into what's going on in classrooms everywhere, and I love it. I also get to learn really fun things like I did not know that Texas homecoming was a phenomenon of its own. I did not know about these bows that they have, these enormous, I mean, a Viking would be proud of the depth of the armor that they put on and these flowers and ribbons and things. No idea. I got such an education on that. So it's so much fun. We compare temperatures lately. It's
Right.
who's winning on the cold front, and it's fantastic. Challenging sometimes when you've got people on the East Coast and the West Coast, but it generally just works out really well. We love it.
So, what are some of the joys of what you do at Kessler? And flipping that also, what are some of the challenges?
The joys are we get to make fun science experiences and just that's I'm never going to get over that. None of us who work in this business are ever going to want to stop doing that. I know I'm supposed to be running a company, but I'm still in there coming up with things to do and escape room ideas, and we're just having a blast with doing that stuff. So that's the joy, is just bringing things in and then seeing teachers love it. You know, there's a Facebook group that Chris started years ago that for teachers, and seeing them just happy and using our stuff, it's delightful. Um, that's fun. The challenges are right now, honestly, in the education world, there are a lot of political forces going on. There's a lot of pushing all teachers to do the same thing all the time. That is so stifling. I don't know a single teacher who went into teaching saying, you know what would be great if you could just hand me a script so I never have to actually think about what I'm doing with my students. Nobody wants that. That's not
Right.
why we became teachers. We want to delight our students. We want to surprise our students. We want to engage our students. And so that's challenging. Just how do we negotiate that? How do we make sure that teachers are able to check all the boxes, but still really enjoy what they're doing? So that's a challenge for sure.
Well, let's go into that challenge just a little bit because I think you're right. I know that as a teacher, one of the things that I found most appealing was exactly what you said, using my creativity and figuring out how to engage and delight my kids. And that's very individual because the kids I have this year are not the same kids I had last year, and they're not the kids I'm going to have next year. So even if I'm doing the exact same activity, you know, and I know that it's going to hit different depending on the group of kids.
Yes.
So, how do you help teachers maintain that spark
Yeah.
and still hit the things that they have to teach?
Yeah. What we try to do is just give many options. You know, we try to think what would we enjoy when we had the opportunity to teach. So we come up with a station lab where students are moving around the room and they're engaging and doing different activities. But then we also write a writing prompt. We also write a reading comprehension passage. We also write an escape room. We try to give many options. We team up with Steve Spangler, whom we both know, and we try to write things that incorporate his videos because the students love his videos. So we just try to find variety because novelty is the antidote to feeling like you're stuck in a rut all the time. So we try to do that and just try to give room for creativity. You know, try to inspire the teachers that this is just to get you started. There are so many options here. You know, when we give them student choice projects, we've got 14 different activities that students could pick from in there or that teachers can assign. Just try to give them options so that they feel like we're supporting them, but we're not strangling their intelligence and creativity at the same time, you know?
Right. And I know from having used and looked at the Kessler projects that one of the things that is inherent is you've got sort of this template, but it's not stand and deliver, that you give teachers the option of I could do XYZ, I can adapt it. You even provide it where they're able to go in and make some edits themselves when they're planning and using it. So once they've got it, they've got the option to customize it for their own classes, which I think is really valuable.
Yeah, we provide everything in an editable format because you and we would not have been happy just handing out the same worksheet year after year. It's we're going to want to tweak that. We're going to want to make it work for our students, and and all of us on the team are the same way. We're just like, yeah, of course you've got to be able to edit this. So we figured out really early on that just giving people PowerPoints, you know, every teacher knows how to edit a PowerPoint or a Google Slides or whatever. So
Right.
we don't use fancy publishing software. We don't use anything that a teacher couldn't just bring up and use. So
Makes
that's
sense.
how we solve that problem. Yeah.
So, what are you most proud of?
Okay, so this is probably uh it seems like such a small thing, but on the other hand, it meant so much to me. When I was doing the inquiry labs, that's what I came in to start editing. There were like three of them that didn't get written for various reasons. They had fallen through the cracks or someone had started and not finished. So I got to go in and write three of the inquiry labs, and two of them got to incorporate two of my favorite things ever. And that's one of the fun things about writing this stuff is you get to bring in the stuff that you really like. So I got to write an inquiry lab that was based around building out an aquarium. And it was about organization, populations and organisms. And the idea was you had this whole catalog of fish and plants and what were you going to be able to fit into that tank and then just brought in the whole conversation. Well, I love aquariums. I love fish tanks. We have many in the house, so that was fun to be able to bring that in because that's what I would have loved to do when I was a student, just dream about, building this fish tank. So that was fun. And then the other one was for abiotic and biotic factors. And I really like games and like board games, video games also, but also board games. And so the lab is actually inspired by the Settlers of Catan, the little hexagonal
Uh-huh.
tiles. So you end up cutting out these tiles, making a set for the student group. And when they assemble them, it makes kind of a landscape with all these little letters on it. And then they're doing a line transect across that. They put a ruler down or a string and they look at all the letters that are across there, and each letter means like rock, grass, animal, and they have this code that they crack, what are they finding there? And then they do these population studies because, I'm in Maine. Going outside is not always an option. Like it's great if you can take your students out and throw down a rope and count everything across there, but for a major portion of our school year, it's snow on the ground. You're not doing that sort of work outside. So I was really proud that I got to bring in one of my favorite games and make something that you could use any time of year. So
That's
those are my
awesome.
two proudest moments in Kessler so far.
So Kesler Science is just sort of finished revamping and putting out station labs to meet both the Texas standards and the NGSS. What's next? Can you tease a little bit about where you all are going?
So the next thing that we are releasing very soon is we've made inquiry labs. We've gone back to the inquiry labs, and for NGSS, we wanted to make something that teachers who don't have access to a lot of materials, we all are in this boat, right? Um, or we actually started this way back during the pandemic. Teachers who were in lockdown, teachers who had sick, absent kids, whatever. How do you bring science to those rooms, to those students? So we took the inquiry labs, and for a vast majority of them, we set up experiments and we recorded the experiments and we made videos of the whole thing from start to finish with all the procedures, but we didn't explain them. The student gets to look at the video instead of doing it hands-on. And then there's always something hands-on too. There's an interactive or some sort of digital thing that they get to do because we just don't believe in not doing hands-on. Um, but it just gives students a chance to see science in action and engage with that when their teachers don't have a hood in their classroom where they can do a chemical
Right.
experiment, where they don't have sinks in their classroom. So many of us are just out there doing these science experiments with very little resources. So that's the most exciting thing we're coming up with. We've got 4 of them are games that we're putting on the website. So students go out and play the game and then they interact with that, and that's going to be fun. So I'm really excited to see how teachers react to that, if that's helpful to them.
Well, and I know one of the other things, just thinking about what you were saying earlier about your adventures in learning and when you were in school, not having the science teachers as role models, not seeing science done around you or being exposed to scientists. Having looked at the Kessler Science projects and been a part of sort of seeing all of that, I know that one of the things that you're committed to is helping kids be able to see themselves in science and to be able to see what real scientists look like in sort of all aspects, because not all scientists wear lab coats. And
Exactly. Yes.
so I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the ways that you guys have done that.
Yeah. So we are always looking for ways to make students think like scientists. So when we wrote, for example, the weekly visual data. So this is a project we said students need to interact with graphs and charts. They don't know how to read them. They don't understand how to make them. They're missing out. So we thought, how do you come to care about graphs and charts? Well, for one, you have to care about what's in the graph or the chart. Nobody ever cared about a graph and chart if it showed nothing you had any interest in. So we started off, we said, okay, part 1, here's an interesting phenomenon. What could a scientist study or gather data about in this situation? if you and any kind of scientist. So there'll be things like, well, an astronomer could study this, or a biologist could study this. And they just try to look at it from all these different ways where they are trying to think like the scientist of what could I study here if I was one of these people. And then the next day they get a graph. And the question is, how do you relate that graph to the phenomenon you looked at yesterday? And so they have to look at that graph and try to figure out what it's explaining and how it's connecting to that phenomenon. Then the next day, they're asking questions about the graph, they're labeling the graph, things like that. So they're really getting into it. The following day, they are revising. They're taking the graph like, how else could you show this information? Give me something different. Give me a infographic, give me a different kind of chart or something. And then the last day, we give them data and say, now you make something out of this. Relates to the phenomenon, and they get in there. So we try to do things like that in all of our Spangler phenomenon lessons. They're always at the end. It's like, are you going to write like a scientist, design like an engineer? What are you going to do? So we try to put them in there. And of course, we try to feature a diverse population of examples, and everything we do. There's just lots of different examples of people from all walks of life, just encountering science, doing science, even people who don't look like scientists are doing science. So we try to bring that in everywhere. But we also just try to get the students to see themselves doing science work. Best comment ever. A teacher wrote back in and said that when they used those graphs, one of their students said, I feel so smart when I finish these. And it's like, that's exactly how you should feel.
That's awesome.
You should just feel so smart. Like, look at you, what you can do. So we love that.
Well, and it's really connected to Adam Gant and sort of the art of rethinking things as well. Like there's a lot of connection to current psychology and science in the way the products are presented.
We try. We try.
So, Allie, I've been fortunate enough to get to hang out with you in real life in
Yes.
Colorado for Steve Spangler conferences. And I've had the chance to travel and explore with you. So I know firsthand that you have a natural playfulness and a sense of curiosity, and you bring that to all that you do. So, how do you foster and nurture your own sense of learning through play? And then, how do you bring that to your life and to that of your work at Kesler?
First of all, I have to say, I think you bring that out in people. I think you are so playful and curious that it just naturally resonates with people. So I think that that's a big part of it is just finding your people, that are going to bring that out to you. Uh, in my own life, I think about the ways that I did things with my own children. We just always tried to look at the world with that sense of wonder, and we always were ready to just deep dive into something. I remember one summer we had the whole summer ahead of us. So we thought, what are some of our favorite things? Fish, barns, farm, like whatever it was.
Right.
We just took a week and we would just label it on the calendar. This was fish week. This was stars week. This was whatever week. And that week, we just went all out. If it was fish, we'd go to the pet store. We didn't have a ton of resources, so we'd go to the pet store and look at all the fish, and we'd read books about fish, and we'd sing songs about fish, and we'd make paper fish, and people would get all excited if they found that they had a t-shirt with a fish on it. We would just dive in as hard as we could to that topic and just explore the heck out of it. And that was fun. That was such a good time. And in 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 Kessler, I have such a dynamic group of people. There are people like you who are just excited. So they come up with the most exciting ideas and fun things like, oh, this would make a great escape room. We should do this. And so it's, we're all just big kids and in a lot of ways, right? And Chris probably chief among all of us. Yeah, the
He is
middle
the
school
chief
sense of
kid.
humor, right? It runs strong in that one. And so yeah, that's just you find your people, and if you're in a classroom and you don't have those people, you don't have people around you who just share that enthusiasm. That's why Chris created that Facebook group. And that's what you need to do is you need to get out there and find the people who are going to say, yeah, that's so cool when your students have a caterpillar that they bring in, I remember getting so excited. I had a great big Crocopia caterpillar
Yeah.
that my students brought in. no one around me cared. No, not, the history teachers didn't care. The fifth grade teacher didn't care. They're like, oh, what you gonna do with that? Like, I remember getting online to my people and they'd be like, yes, that is so awesome. So you've got to find your people and just,
Exactly. And the people who bring out that sense of playfulness and joy.
yes.
And we're here, we're all out there and we're looking for each other. And I think more than ever, that sense of connection
Mhm.
is so important. And
Yeah.
then last question for today, because it's
Yeah.
the one I love to finish with. What brings you hope?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, some people don't understand this part about me, but I am a very, a rigorous science person. I'm very skeptical and evidence-based. I'm also a person of faith, so that is a huge source of hope for me. And when I look at how humanity is built and how humans are built, we are built for resilience. We are built to adapt. We are built to get better. I think about, my daughter broke her arm years ago, and the doctor said, well, it's bad. She might need surgery, but if I can just get the bones to touch, it'll be okay. What on earth are you talking about? So he went in with this x-ray and he's like, I was able to get them to touch. They're crooked, but she was young. It'll be okay. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, no. Little kids, their bones remodel. She'll have a bump for about 6 months where this will heal up and it'll be crooked. And over time, you're not going to be able to tell she ever broke her arm. It's just going to straighten itself right out. And it did. It was amazing. Her arm just, it went from being slightly bent and lumpy to just beautiful and straight again. So, and then you look at what humanity has been through and the ways that we have survived, adapted, overcome, and we are genetically built with so much ability to adapt, right? We can just, there are so many things built into us, into nature, into everything, that genetic diversity, ability to adapt, ability to evolve and just grow and move forward. And I'm just excited. That's what gives me hope, is that, there are we haven't reached the end of science. We haven't reached the end of adapting and growing, and history is a long arc. It's a very long arc. And I love looking at that, about where we have been and where we are now. There are a lot of things that might look kind of sideways right now, but overall, I'd rather be living right now than, say, back in the eras of no solid science knowledge, no antibiotics, no sense of what caused anything. This is a good time to be alive, and I think it's going to continue to be a good time to be alive.
Well, Allie, thank you so much. It has been a delight to have you on the Adventures in Learning podcast, and I will make sure to drop all of the contact information in the show notes so that people can reach out to you.
Thank you, Diane. It is always so much fun to get together with you.